With day one of the legal tampering period in the books, how did the silver and black stack up? Who did they gain? Who did they lose? And who did they not have a shot at? That plus more on Tuesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for March 11th, 2025.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Definitely appreciate you. If you're catching the show wherever you find your favorite podcast, or you're checking us out by way of the YouTube page, you know we appreciate both. The show continues to grow each and every day, and that's because of your consistent support and because of the job that my man Ari does behind the scenes on the YouTube page, making sure we look good and sound good each and every day. We definitely appreciate him. We shout him out. He's on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. And if you want to be a part of the show, as many of you do, 707-654-4693. That's the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. As a matter of fact, we'll close out the show today in segment number 3, as we often do, hearing from you, your calls and texts. A lot of great feedback based off day one of the legal tampering period. So that's how we'll close out the show. Segment number 2, we'll talk about the players that the Raiders added, who they came to agreement with on day one. That could be their own players. That could be from players outside the building. We'll also talk about a couple players outside the building that I had my eye on for the silver and black, that, well, they weren't able to land those guys. So that'll all come up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Here in segment number 1, just news and notes, really the guys that the Raiders lost from their current roster, and also a couple news and notes from around the division, the AFC West, that could ultimately affect the Raiders as well. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Let's start with the players that the Raiders lost on day one of the legal tampering period. 3 guys on defense, 3 pretty good contributors on the defensive side of the ball. One being the biggest, Robert Spillane. Linebacker Robert Spillane agreed to a deal with the Patriots, 3 years, $37.5 million with $20.6 million guaranteed. That comes from Jeremy Fowler of ESPN, and that was one of the first names that I saw pop up on Monday. And you know, we were talking about it. I mentioned Robert Spillane was a big-time priority. He's one of those guys that Patrick Graham has called the coach on the field. But you realize that when he signed the 2-year deal with the Raiders, when Dave Ziegler signed him, when he was the GM, that was a minimum deal. That was like 2 years, $10 million? It was not very much. So you knew, especially based off what Zach Bond had signed in Philadelphia, that he probably was going to get a pretty good deal. And this was not the Zach Bond deal. Zach went for about $50-something million, but $37.5, $20.6 million guaranteed. Pretty stinking good for Robert Spillane. Now, he's probably the one that the Raiders will miss the most because he is that guy, as I mentioned, the coach on the field. He's the quarterback of the defense. He's the guy that Patrick Graham has said many times is really an extension of him on the field. So when he joined the Raiders, I'll be the first to tell you, I didn't know what Robert Spillane was going to bring to the table. Everything I had done as far as research had realized that he's a run stuffer, but he ended up being an all-around linebacker. He really turned his career around with the Raiders, got an opportunity to be a starter, and he never came off the field. So he did a really good job. He earned that contract. He's definitely going to be missed. What are the Raiders going to have to do to try to fill that void? Well, that's up to them to figure that out, whether it's in free agency, whether that's in a draft, or the combination of the two. But Robert Spillane gone to the New England Patriots, who, oh, by the way, they agreed to a lot of money deals on the first day of the legal tampering period. So Spillane off to the Patriots. Also, how about this one? This is a pretty big one as well. This came from Jordan Schultz from Fox. He said, breaking, the Panthers are expected to sign former Raiders star safety Trayvon Merrick to a 3-year, $51 million contract. Sources tell NFL on Fox. Merrick started 64 games during his 4 years in Las Vegas, was one of the most coveted safeties on the market. That's a big addition for the Carolina Panthers. I didn't think that Trayvon Merrick was coming back. I've mentioned it many times that it didn't seem like he really was fired up to come back after that Week 18 game to close out the 2024 season. Myself and Ryan Hogue both kind of got that feeling when we left the locker room. Like, yeah, I don't think Trayvon's going to be big to come back. I also didn't think he was going to get that kind of a deal. 3 years, $51 million. I know that the safety market was not huge in free agency. I also knew that the safety market was not huge when it comes to the draft, but didn't think that Merrick was going to get that kind of money, but he did, and so I don't blame him for taking the trip to Carolina and agreeing to that deal. So that, again, will be a deal that can become official coming up on Wednesday, as all these deals that are outside the building type deals can be done Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern time, 1 p.m. Pacific time. So Trayvon Merrick, a guy that I remember when he was drafted in the second round out of TCU, I was very high on him, thought he was going to be a big-time playmaker on the back end of the Raiders defense. Never really turned into the guy I was expecting him to. Thought he was going to be much more of a ball hawk. He did a really good job at TCU, coming away with interceptions, getting his hands on the ball, and actually coming away with it. He did half of it with the Raiders, right? He got his hands on a lot of balls, but he put them on the ground more times than not. Did, come up with a handful of interceptions here and there, but to me, it just wasn't enough. But he did have a good season last year playing up in the box and around the line of scrimmage, and really was able to get in the backfield and make some tackles for loss. So Trayvon Merrick, he's out of there from the Raiders and now heads to the Carolina Panthers. Also, and it's funny, we talked about these two guys, and I said, well, either or one of the two will probably return. Well, how about neither, right? The Packers signing former Raiders cornerback Nate Hobbs per source. 4-year, $48 million deal, including $16 million guaranteed. That comes down from Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network. Again, I didn't think that Spillane was going to get $37.5 million. Didn't think that Merrick was going to get $51. I sure didn't think Nate Hobbs was going to get $48 million just based off availability alone. That was the big thing. We know that when he's on the field, how good of a player he can be. We know what he means to the Raiders when he's out there on the field. But, man, he just wasn't out there enough. So I thought that was going to affect what he does, as far as free agency goes. But the Packers decided that they were going to go ahead and give him a nice chunk of change. 4 years, $48 million with $16 million guaranteed. So, again, you can't get mad. He's a former fifth-round pick, so he wanted to get somewhat of a bag, and that's what he got. So I don't know if the Raiders ever had a real conversations with any of these guys, Spillane, Merrick, or Hobbs, but they ultimately lose all three of them. At least they come to agreements with these teams on day one of the legal tampering period. But that's a lot of coin right there for Nate Hobbs. Again, a guy who played, 11 games in 2024. Just not enough as far as I'm concerned when it comes to getting big money. But the good thing is, as these guys are getting signed and agreeing to deals with other teams, it's the first time in a long time that the Raiders have dudes on the roster that other teams covet, right? How many times has it been over years as Raider fans, we sit back and we watch these guys hit free agency and no team picks them up till late, right? Or else they give them like a 1-year deal, try to prove it and see what happens, then they're out of the league. These guys are big-time players. So what that means is, based off of what the Raiders end up doing in free agency, and it doesn't look like they're going to be super busy, not that that's a big surprise, they could end up on the right side of the compensatory pick formula, right? The compensatory pick has to do with how many free agents you sign, how many free agents you lose, how much playing time that they have, how much money that they're making, whatever the case may be. Like the Raiders have 2 compensatory picks this year. They can end up with some more next year based off these 3 guys that have already left the team. But again, they still have to go through the rest of the free agent process to see what the formula is actually going to look like. But they're getting guys. There's interest from other teams of their guys. And again, to be on the very first day of the legal tampering period, and 3 of the big-time playmakers and players on the defensive side of the ball are already off to other teams. The Chargers, they came to an agreement with former Steelers running back Najee Harris on a 1-year deal worth up to $9.5 million. We know what Jim Harbaugh wants to do in L.A. with the Chargers. Run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. Now they got former Steeler Najee Harris, former first-round pick, on a 1-year deal to run the rock in L.A., so just something to pay attention to. And I mentioned Robert Spillane, him getting swept up by the Patriots. What were the Raiders going to do to fill that void? Many of Raider Nation hit us up and said, well, Dre Greenlaw. And I know some people have called into the podcast and talked about Dre Greenlaw, the linebacker from the 49ers, and, he's coming off that Achilles tear that he suffered in the Super Bowl that was played in Las Vegas. He returned to action in 2024 late in the season. To me, he didn't look like he was really himself at that stage of the game. But again, he's just removed from an Achilles tear. So, you assume that after this offseason, he'll probably be better next year. Well, he agreed to a deal with the Denver Broncos. The Broncos are expected to sign 49ers standout linebacker Dre Greenlaw, giving him a 3-year deal worth $35 million. That's going to the Denver Broncos. So you see the AFC West, how it's shaping up. Every team did something on the very first day. The Chargers added Najee Harris. They brought back Khalil Mack also on a 1-year, $18 million fully guaranteed deal. And the Broncos, they got a couple guys from the 49ers as well, but Dre Greenlaw being that main one. Here's one nugget to pay attention to before we get to segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. This is the news and notes part of it. We'll get into what the Raiders did do on day one. This comes from my guy Jordan Schultz from Fox as well. He said, source, the Patriots have had discussions on trading quarterback Joe Milton III and would like to trade him to the right situation to continue his development in the NFL should a deal get done. New England loves Milton, but Drake May is their franchise quarterback, and they just signed Josh Dobbs to a 2-year, $8 million contract to be the backup. So I know that some people have called in, talked about Joe Milton. Pay attention to that one because he could be on the move. We've heard rumblings about this before, but wasn't too sure if it was going to come to fruition. But as Jordan Schultz pointed out, after they signed Josh Dobbs to a 2-year, $8 million contract, it's really going to be tough for Joe Milton to get some reps there in New England. So pay attention to that. But coming up in segment number 2, what the Raiders did do, right? They lost out on guys like Robert Spillane, Trayvon Merrick, and Nate Hobbs. What did they do on day 1 of the legal tampering period? We'll talk about that in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about one of the great sponsors here, and that is Betterhelp. Taking care of your mental health can feel like a big investment, but it's just as important as taking care of your body. Traditional in-person therapy can cost anywhere from $100 to $250 per session. But with BetterHelp, you can save up to 50% per session. BetterHelp offers a flat fee for weekly online therapy sessions, making professional support more accessible and affordable. With over 30,000 therapists and over 5 million people helped, it's the world's largest online therapy platform. They're able to relate for self-care. If you're thinking about self-care, relatability is something that they specialize in. Obviously, they always will talk about the therapy's impact. They also fit into your busy schedule. And there's a lot of misconceptions that are out there, but BetterHelp will walk you through it. Your well-being is worth it. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Time to talk about the moves that the Raiders did make. We talked about the guys that they lost in segment number 1. Time to talk about the moves that they came to agreement on Monday, the first day of the legal tampering period. Again, if you're wondering about the legal tampering period, what goes into that? Again, Monday, March 10th at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific time, teams are permitted to contact and begin negotiating contracts with the agents of players who are unrestricted free agents. That's called the legal tampering period. It ends at 4 p.m. Eastern on March 12th, 1 p.m. Pacific time, which is when the free agency signing period officially begins. So any player outside of your building has to wait till the new league year opens up to be official, right? That's trades, that's signings, whatever the case may be, unless they're already out of the mix. Like, say, the Jets, who released Devontae Adams, and he was already out and available. He was able to sign right away. But for teams that are just losing guys as free agents, they cannot sign until March 12th when the legal when the new league year actually opens up. So now it's just everything is agreements. And every year it's like 1, maybe 2 that will come through, and it'll end up being, rescinded. A guy will have a change of heart. Maybe they'll fail a physical. Something always happens to 1 or 2 free agents across the league, not with the Raiders, but across the league. Once in a while it'll happen with the Raiders, but it happens, right? So it's just kind of like that 2-day grace period, even though I think it's silly, but okay. It is what it is. So now that you know exactly about the legal tampering period, that was day 1. Today's day 2. Obviously, the new league year will open up on Wednesday. So what did the Raiders do? First of all, let's talk about what one of my big keys was signing their own. That's something that I talked about on Monday's show. Thought there was going to be a heavy priority. They decided that they were going to bring back Malcolm Kuntz on a 1-year, $12 million deal. This came from Jeremy Fowler from ESPN. I thought that was great. I really did. I mean, seeing what he was able to do in the second half of the 2023 season, all I could think of in 2024, he was going to be a monster. He was going to be lined up to have a hell of a year with Max Crosby, Christian Wilkins, right? Adam Butler, John Jenkins, all those guys. And then he was going to come in and really have a big year. Tore his ACL at the end of the preseason in 2024, so never was able to get into a game in the 2024 season, missed all of it. So now he's back on a 1-year deal. It's 1 year, $12 million. He's going to have a chance as a motivated player, knowing that he's got a chance to really cash in. We know what edge rushers are making if they have a big season. He's going to be motivated. It's a contract year. The Raiders are going to get the best of him. And oh, by the way, they have a healthy Max Crosby, a healthy Christian Wilkins coming back. They'll have Adam Butler, who they re-signed. Remember, he re-signed to a 3-year deal worth $16.5 million and $11 million in guaranteed. And now you're bringing back Malcolm Kuntz, who missed the whole season. So even as a guy like myself who's torn both of my ACLs, both of my right and my left leg, I know that it's never quite the same after the first year. You still have to feel pretty good that Malcolm Kuntz, who's a high trained professional athlete, right? And all, missed all year, is going to have the chance to rehab and be ready to go. And like I said, extra motivated for this 2025 year. So I was really happy that he's going to come back. The Raiders are going to benefit from what he's able to do, and he'll have a chance to, cash in either with the Raiders. They see him as the guy that they see as a long-term future, or just reap the benefits and then let him walk in free agency. Whatever the case may be, I was glad to see Malcolm Kuntz agree to a deal, 1 year's $12 million to return. outside of the Raiders building, what did they do? Well, they started with free agent safety Jeremy Chin. This came from Jordan Schultz from Fox. Matter of fact, a couple reports from him. The first one was that Jeremy Chin is signing with the Raiders on a 2-year deal worth over $16 million, over 75% of it fully guaranteed at signing, and he called it a major addition to the Vegas secondary. Jeremy Chin was a guy I was a big fan of coming out of college. Thought that he can do some really good things on the back end. Thought he was going to be a ball hawk, but he really wasn't, similar to Trayvon Merrick. Did some good things for 4 years in Carolina, but last year had a really good season with the Washington Commanders. So the Raiders get him on a 2-year deal, a lot cheaper than what the Panthers are getting Trayvon Merrick, 3 years, $51 million, right? So that's a really it's almost a lateral move, right? I don't really look at it as a drop-off. Again, there's a couple things that Trayvon Merrick, including just continuity with Patrick Graham and knowing the Raiders defense, obviously that's something. But I'll say this, last year, you saw Jeremy Chin have a really good season under Dan Quinn. And you know who knows Dan Quinn really well? Yeah, Pete Carroll, right? Obviously from the Pete Carroll tree. So all Pete Carroll has to do is turn on the film and say, okay, that's how Dan used Jeremy Chin. We're going to use him as well. He's a Swiss Army knife. You can line him up as safety. You can line him up near the line of scrimmage. You can line him up at corner, put him in the slot, wherever you want him. He's a football player, right? That was the big thing about Jeremy Chin. He's just an absolute football player. So, again, is he some end-all, be-all? Is he the guy that's going to hoist the Lombardi for you? No, but he's a nice addition. And, again, you're not paying $51 million like the Panthers agreed to a deal with Trayvon Merrick. Also, in the secondary, and this is another report coming from Jordan Schultz from Fox, Lonnie Johnson Jr. to the Raiders, and he says, proven veteran, sure-handed tackler with 4 career interceptions, 15 career PBUs, solid pickup for Pete Carroll's defense. The big thing about Lonnie Johnson Jr., you can call him a cornerback, you can call him a safety. When he came out of Kentucky, he was a cornerback. He was, in Houston, they listed him as a cornerback. He went to the Panthers, they listed him as a safety. He's really a special teams guy, right? Tashawn Reed from The Athletic tweeted out, new Raiders safety Lonnie Johnson Jr. has largely been a special teams contributor since he started multiple games in a season back in 2021. So obviously it's been a few years since he started multiple games on defense. He just played 13 defensive snaps for the Panthers in 15 games last year, but he logged 339 special team snaps. The good thing about him, he's going to add competition. He's a guy that's a sure tackler. He's a physical tackler. Obviously, that's something that Pete Carroll's going to like. So a lot of times we see the Raiders missing a bunch of tackles. He's not going to be that guy. Again, I think he'll be a key contributor on special teams. I wouldn't say that he's a guy that you're going to hang your hat on and be like, man, that's going to be my new favorite cornerback or new favorite safety, whatever the case may be. But he will provide competition, and we know that that's what Pete Carroll's all about, is competition. So Lonnie Johnson Jr. added 339 special team snaps in 2024 is really all you need to know about him. Then I found this one to be pretty interesting. This one came down late on Monday night. The Raiders, they signed former Steelers free agent linebacker Landon Roberts, who reached an agreement with the Raiders on a 1-year, $3 million deal. That's from Adam Schefter from ESPN. And the reason why I found that to be pretty interesting, Landon Roberts is not a name that everyone's going to do a backflip about or even know who he is. But not many people knew who Robert Spillane was either. That's why I saved that one, not to mention it came down late on Monday. But I wanted to save that one because, again, not too many people knew exactly who Robert Spillane was when Dave Ziegler signed up to a 2-year deal. Now, all of a sudden, you're getting a Landon Roberts coming over from the Steelers, another guy that is a sure tackler, another guy that's physical. When I went and kind of checked to see the reaction from Steeler fans, and I like to do that sometimes, a lot of them said, well, what, $3 million? You couldn't match that? $3 million, well, that's not that much money. How come you couldn't match that? So to me, it lets me know that he was a guy that fans, appreciated, just like Raider Nation appreciated Robert Spillane. And I'm not saying he's going to turn into Robert Spillane. I'm not saying he's the new middle linebacker for the Raiders long term. I think that they'll go ahead and probably address some more linebackers in free agency. And as I mentioned before, also in the draft. But I did find that one to be an interesting one because, again, it's almost the same situation that the Raiders were in when they signed Robert Spillane. Not too many people knew who he was. Not too many people thought he was going to be a key contributor. I just thought he was going to be a run stuffer because that's all we really knew. We had all heard about the Derrick Henry tackle down by the line of scrimmage and like, oh man, go look at that. Go look at that highlight. That's who Robert Spillane is. But Robert Spillane ended up being a lot better linebacker than just that one highlight. Again, not saying that Landon Roberts is going to be that, but it's another addition that the Raiders have agreed to that could become finalized on Wednesday. So Malcolm Kuntz returns on a 1-year deal. Great. Jeremy Chin agrees to a 2-year deal at the safety position. Lonnie Johnson Jr., a main special teamer, but a safety cornerback, whatever you want to call him, he agrees to a deal. And also free agent linebacker Elandon Roberts from the Steelers agrees on a 1-year, $3 million deal that goes along with the Raiders agreeing to terms with their own guy, Adam Butler, on a 3-year deal where $16.5 million and $11 million guaranteed. That was something that was agreed on Sunday and talked about on Monday's show. So those are the guys that they came to terms with. A couple guys that I had talked about that they weren't able to come to terms with, which was a little disappointing, but you get it. It's free agency. That's what happens. Cornerback DJ Reed, he was the guy that I was looking at from the Jets. I thought, okay, now that could be a big splash if you're going to make that move. Well, he didn't get the opportunity to get with the Raiders because the Lions swooped him up. The Lions are signing cornerback DJ Reed to a 3-year, $48 million contract. The deal has $32 million fully guaranteed. So that's a really good move for DJ Reed. He's been a very solid cornerback. Wherever he's been, he's going to be a really solid quarterback in Detroit. Obviously, they went and got Terrion Arnold in the back end of round 1 of the draft in Detroit last year. They also signed Amik Robertson from the Raiders as a free agent last year. So they're continuing to make that secondary, trying to evolve it and make that come around, try to make that a strength of their team as opposed to a weakness. But DJ Reed to the Lions, that was a really big deal. That came down pretty early on Monday. Also, as far as the cornerbacks go, Byron Murphy is the guy that I've been looking at. He did not get out of Minnesota, right? Arizona had drafted him originally, come out of Washington. He goes to Minnesota. Then I thought, okay, he's going to be a free agent. Now's the Raiders' chance to finally get him. Nope, not this time. The Vikings and Pro Bowl cornerback Byron Murphy agreed to terms on a monster 3-year, $66 million contract, an average of $22 million a year from Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network. So almost, right? Thought they were going to get him. Nope, didn't get him. So Byron Murphy, I know that he was a guy that the Raiders looked at, that they liked. He had a lot of ball production last year for Minnesota, and Minnesota realized that. So he's going to stick in Minnesota. He's got the 3-year deal, again, $66 million contract. Big ups to Byron Murphy, and just a guy that the Raiders weren't able to land. And finally, another guy I was looking at for the Raiders potentially, talked about him on Monday's show, was wide receiver Chris Godwin of Tampa Bay, coming off the dislocated ankle. I knew that there was going to be interest from other teams out there. I figured with John Spytek in the mix and Tom Brady in the mix, Chris Godwin could potentially be in the mix as well, but he wasn't able to get out of Tampa Bay. He inked a 3-year, $66 million contract with $45 million guaranteed. That's per Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network. He also noted that the 29-year-old took less money to remain in Tampa. The Bucs have since announced Godwin's re-signing. So obviously he likes what he had going on there with Baker Mayfield, liked being there in Tampa Bay, took less money to stay home. So I don't know if that means that the Raiders and other teams actually reached out to him and offered him a deal, and he just said, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. But heck of a deal right there. Again, for a guy coming off a dislocated ankle, that's not a bad move right there at all. Staying where you know, staying with the quarterback that you know, already respected by the team. You know that they appreciate you, and it was a shame that when Chris Godwin dislocated his ankle, I think it was like week 7 in 2024, when the game was already out of control. There was no reason for him to really be in there except for he's a competitor, and you know what competitors do. They want to compete, and that's when he dislocated his ankle, but he's back to Tampa Bay on a 3-year deal. So we'll continue to see what happens. I mean, again, it's the legal tampering period. Deals happen in the middle of the night. Deals happen at all times. You got to keep your head on a swivel. Right when you think everything's over, all of a sudden, bink, here comes a tweet from Adam Schefter. Bink, here comes a tweet from Ian Rappaport. Bink, here comes a report from Jordan Schultz. Ian, you know, all these guys, Tom Pelissero, all these guys. Bink, bink, bink. Just, again, you got to keep your head on a swivel because, man, these things becoming fast and furious. So that's what to look for, or the guys that the Raiders did bring in and or at least, agreed to deals with, and again, will become official coming up on Wednesday. But what's on your mind? Your calls and texts are next, 707-654-4693 as we close things out in segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about another great sponsor on the show, and that is Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who could do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. All so you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Here we go, Red Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts. You have that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with Darren from the 203. He's calling to give his overall feeling on free agency and the way it's gone so far for the Silver and Black. Here he is, Darren.
Hey, Q. It's Darren calling in from the 203. I'm calling in with just like a general overview of how free agency's gone so far. And I would like to start with expressing I'm glad we're not breaking the bank, right? That the Raiders haven't gone out and paid crazy contracts. I like that. I do think that Spillane's contract was reasonable. Maybe time will show differently because of his age or because of the guaranteed money or whatnot. You look at the guaranteed money, it's basically a 2-year deal. It's fully guaranteed with a 3rd-year option. But that's the one where I'm like, man. Hobbs, 4 years, like $12 million a year, that's a lot. I know only 60 was guaranteed, but that's a lot. For a guy who's been missing a lot of time, I wish him the best. Trayvon Morik, oh my goodness. Good for him, but oh my goodness. I don't think Jeremy Chinn's necessarily an upgrade. I don't know if I say he's a downgrade. It's fairly lateral to some. They both are good at different things. But for $8 million a year compared to $20 million a year, I'm okay with that. And those are really the 2 big ones that I feel, or the 3 big ones that I feel like we've lost. Looking at some of the contracts we've given out, Kuntz, 1 year, $12 million. Okay. I would have preferred 8, but I'm not going to cry over $4 million, in the grand scheme of the cap space. I'm glad that the Raiders got him back. A 1-year prove-it deal makes sense. 2 years would have been cool, but 1 year makes sense. And I already kind of gave my piece about Jeremy Chinn, and am I forgetting anyone? I feel like those are really the only ones we've brought in. If I'm forgetting someone, shame on me. But I'm okay with it being relatively quiet. There was no one like Wilkins last year. Like, I wanted Wilkins like nothing else. You know, I was like, they need to go spend heavy on this guy and then be reasonable with the rest of their money. That's basically what they did. So, kind of doing the same this year, but again, there's no one in particular. Spillane, I guess, would have been that guy for me this year. Excuse me. But what I'm glad about is that they're not throwing out these crazy contracts. I love De'Ami Brown. If you know about Dynasty Fantasy Football, I have him rostered in many leagues. If you don't, just know that I believe in him. $10 million? I know it's only 1 year, but $10 million for De'Ami Brown is a choice. And Josh Palmer, too, like 3 for 36. There's a lot of contracts that I looked at. I was like, wow, they're throwing money around like crazy this year. But I don't have time to get into all of them. Those just stick out the most to me. That's it.
D-Man, Darren, thanks for the call. And, yeah, I think Spillane is a big loss, right? The biggest one, honestly. But it's not something that the Raiders can't, rebound from or even upgrade at, right? I mean, he's a really good player, really key cog for Patrick Graham's defense. They spent some good money on him. Some will say the Raiders probably could have matched that or beat that a little bit, maybe spent a little bit over. But they also know that this draft is deep in linebackers. They can address the linebacker position early. Maybe that's not the style that they're looking for. Maybe Robert Spillane is just not the direction that they're going. So I'm just looking to see if this team can upgrade that position, right? And I'm not talking about with Divine Diablo or anything. I'm talking about with a real deal linebacker, right? Tommy Eichenberg, I liked him coming out of Ohio State. We'll see what he can bring to the table. I think he'll have a chance to compete, but I do think that the Raiders will definitely address the linebacking position in a draft that's very deep in linebackers. I think that they'll definitely address that come at the end of April. So, again, he's a big loss, but that's what free agency is. Sometimes you're going to lose some big-time players. You have to be comfortable with that, right? If they wanted to keep him, what they should have done is probably signed him during the regular season, extended him when they had a chance before he ever hit free agency. But instead, they didn't, and obviously it's a new staff, so, John Spytek and Pete Carroll and company are looking up and down the roster, who they like, who they don't like, who they want to spend money on, and who they didn't. So there is that. Darren, thanks so much for the call. Definitely appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Southern Indiana Raider. Says, hey, Q, Southern Indiana Raider here. I had to take a minute and chime in. First, Geno Smith. I don't hate this move at all. Definitely a big upgrade over what we've seen for the last couple seasons. I hope that they don't go crazy on the contract. I still wouldn't mind another quarterback in the draft. I've been watching the frenzy today, and all the Raiders have done is lose players. I'm not going to get all worked up over it, but it's just more holes. I've got to trust that these guys know what they're doing, and I'm certain that they know a hell of a lot more than I do. Thanks again for all that you do. That's Southern Indiana Raider. Thanks for the text. I do appreciate you. And, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, they lost players right? You knew that they were going to lose some. When you have 27 free agents on the roster, you know you're going to lose some. And the one thing I've said, and I don't know, I haven't been in the meetings. I don't know what the vision is of Pete Carroll and John Spytek and Tom Brady and, Chip Kelly and Patrick Graham. I don't know what their ultimate vision is, but the one thing that we've said before is the one way you could turn this roster over really quickly is let guys in free agency walk. Right? I mean, that's the thing. If you don't sign them back, you let them sign deals somewhere else. Again, you deal with the compensatory, the plan in place, the compensatory formula to get a couple more picks here and there, and then you can build the team in your vision. So guys that might not fit what you exactly want, that's okay. You don't have to cut them. You don't have to release them. You just let them walk in free agency, and then you just go from there. So that could be part of it. Again, I'm just kind of spitballing, because I haven't been in the meetings. I don't know exactly what the vision is of a Raider, what they want. Remember, and someone said this, pointed it out on my radio show on Monday, as much as Raider Nation doesn't like the fact that these guys are leaving, this team ultimately won 4 games last season. So just remember that they all won 4 games last season. So as much as we like to see a lot of these guys return because we think that they're key players, they won 4 games in 2024. Right. So obviously they need upgrades all over the roster. And that's what this team and this front office, coaching staff and company are trying to do moving forward. So thanks for the text. I definitely appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Chef Raider. He's calling to talk about the Raiders losing Trayvon Merrick and Nate Hobbs and has a question about the free agent losses. Here he is, Chef Raider.
What's going on, Q? What's going on, Raider Nation? It's your boy, Chef Raider. Real quick, I noticed that Trayvon Merrick and Nate Hobbs signed somewhere else. Good for them. They got their money. Anyway, now Nate Hobbs is a 5th round pick. Do we get compensatory picks? Let me just start with that. Like, do we get compensatory picks for either which one, who, and how exactly would that work, considering that they're, second and 5th round picks or whatever? I mean, is it based on that, or is it based on the fact that they're starters? I can never really work that out. So, compensatory picks. How many are we getting for our free agent signings? All right, man. Love what you do. I'll holler at you. Peace.
Chef, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. And look, this is the deal. To qualify for compensatory picks, teams must end up with more qualifying free agents lost than gained in a particular year. Teams are awarded compensatory draft picks between rounds 3 and 7 and of the draft based upon a league formula that takes into account a player's average salary per year, snap count, and postseason awards. While there is an expected level of compensation for a player based on the amount he is signed for, his playing time or lack thereof in the upcoming season could alter the expectation. So that's the formula. That's the exact definition of how you get compensatory picks and how they're formulated. So again, to qualify for the picks, teams must end up with more qualifying free agents lost than gained in the particular year. So the Raiders lost Spillane. They lose Merrick. They lose Hobbs, right? Those are 3 right there that play into the formula. Now, if they go sign some guys for bigger deals, which I don't think they will, seeing those guys got pretty big money and it doesn't look like the Raiders are dishing out big money at all, they seem like they would be in line, right? But it depends on how many guys they bring in, how many guys, they have for big time playing time. And also it depends on how much those guys, Spillane, Merrick, and Hobbs, play for Green Bay, for New England, and also play for the Panthers, right? So the more that they play, the better for the Raiders. Let's put it like that. So again, this is all going to play into into the formula, and those compensatory picks will be awarded ahead of the 2026 draft, as the ones for this year have already been ruled out there. So thanks so much for that call. Definitely appreciate you. Really good question. Up next, got a text from Josh from the 619. Yo, Q, it's Josh from the 619. I like the Geno trade. We traded for a starter instead of trying to turn a backup like Gardner Minshew and Jimmy G into a starter, and we have a guy that's a proven winner. Since Geno joined the Seahawks, they've only had one season with a negative record, 7 wins. So I see this as a perfect bridge guy, someone who can get us to the playoffs if the chips fall right, and also usher in a new quarterback. I've seen Sanders comp as Geno Smith, and I can see it. It isn't going to run like Lamar, but if there's green in front of him, he could pick up the first down. And that's really all we've been asking for, even when Carr was here. Just got to get a receiver one, a running back one, who knows might be on a similar path to the Commanders. That's Josh in the 619. That's a great point. Again, I don't have a problem with the Geno signing either, or the trade for Geno. He would have been, as many have told me, especially on Monday on my radio show, many told me If he was a free agent, he'd have been the number one free agent on the market. Not Sam Darnold, not Aaron Rodgers, not Russell Wilson, not Justin Fields, but Geno Smith for what he's able to bring to the table. And, of course, he's done winning. Pete Carroll helped turn his career back around. It does not stop the Raiders from drafting the quarterback even as early as number 6. If Shador happens to be there, they could take him. If not, they don't have to, right? I mean, that's the thing. They have flexibility where they can do other things. They could draft a quarterback a little bit later on. We know he's not the end-all, be-all. We know he's not the future franchise quarterback, but he could be Mr. Right Now, and he could help some guy, whoever they end up drafting, kind of, just learn the ropes of the NFL, right? He'll compete with Aiden O'Connell. I think it would be smart if Shador's there at 6 to take him, just to give competition, just to make, there be some heat under Geno, just so he knows that, hey, if I start slipping, this young guy could come in the game because they want to get him in the game anyway. So I think it's a good way to keep a little bit of edge and a little bit of chip on his shoulder. But again, that's for them to work out. And again, that move, it gives them flexibility, which at the end of the day is really what you want. You don't want to be desperate, right? Desperate teams make bad, desperate decisions. You don't want to be that team. Like, got to go get a quarterback, so we got to give up the earth and the moon and the stars and everything to go trade up. And they don't have to do that now. They can still do that, but they don't have to. So thanks so much for that text. I appreciate you. Got a call from Raider Jim in the Pacific Northwest, calling to talk about free agency, who the Raiders lost and who they gained. Also speaks on the acquisition of quarterback Geno Smith. Here he is, Raider Jim from the Pacific Northwest.
Hey, Q. Raider Jim from the Pacific Northwest. Just wanted to call in. I've been listening to the radio all day, listening to the transactions that have been going on, and bummed out that Robert Spillane has left us. And Trayvon Merrick left us as well, and I was somewhat ho-hum on that. But, hey, we get Jeremy Chin, man. The guy brings the heat. He's a freaking Saluki. I love it. It's awesome, and that's a good replacement for what we lost there. Now we need to kind of shore up our ranks with the middle linebacker. I'm not sure what the team's going to do there. With regard to Geno Smith, I think it's freaking awesome. I like Geno a lot. He's a winner. He's a great human being. He works well with Pete Carroll. There's been a debate amongst Raider Nation about whether or not we should go out and get now Shador, or whether we should wait and go down to the lower rounds and get another quarterback. And first, I think if Shador does fall to us, hey, let's go get him, man. I like the kid. He's got a lot of class. He knows how to play, and he could do a lot of great things for the Silver and Black. But if not, go out and get frickin' Mason Graham and put him next to, our stout defensive line. That would be awesome. Then go down to the third round and maybe pick up that kid from, Ohio State that won a national championship. And then you'd have competition, just like what Pete Carroll had when he was a coach here in Seattle. He had Tavares Jackson on his roster. They went out and got Matt Flynn as a free agent, and then they drafted a third rounder whose name was Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson ended up winning out on that competition. He started that season, and things have never been the same for the Seahawks. So it can happen. It has happened for Pete Carroll in his past. Not saying it's going to happen going forward, but I think that that's a scenario I'd like to see play out. Okay, Q. Raider Nation for life, baby.
Thanks so much. And, yeah, Jeremy Chin was a guy I liked when he was coming out of college. The Panthers drafted him, played well, had a great season last year in D.C. I think he's going to be a good, replacement for Trayvon Merrick. As far as Geno goes, he provides that versatility and flexibility that I was just talking about. I think you're spot on about that. The Raiders have a lot of different things they could do now at number 6, now that they have Geno Smith in the mix as the quarterback position. So really good call, Raider Jim. It's great to hear from you. We'll close things out with a text from Ryan in Simi Valley. He says, hey, Q, hope all is well. Ryan from Simi Valley, California. I'm really excited about Geno Smith becoming the Raiders starting quarterback for the next few years. As long as we can protect him better than the Seahawks did, we should see better play out of an already mobile and accurate Geno. That's Ryan, Simi Valley. And, yeah, that was the thing. The Seahawks offensive line was terrible. They were awful, and he ended up taking 50 sacks, second in the league last year behind only Caleb Williams, who took 68. So that can't happen. He can't turn the 15 interceptions like he threw last year. He had 21 touchdowns and 15 picks. He can't do that. He is a guy that has mobility. It's not like he's going to run around the yard like Lamar Jackson, but he does have enough to pick up, as we heard earlier, the first down on 3rd and 8. He can get that. 3rd and 9, he can get that. Right after some green grass, he can pick it up. He can run Chip Kelly's offense. That's the thing. He's and the funny thing is Shador is very similar to him. As many people have said that, that's a fair comp to Shador would be Geno Smith. Well, Gino's done some good things in the league, especially since Pete Carroll has been with him. He really helped save his career. So he wasn't worth the salt in New York with the Jets. We know he's kind of traveled around the league, but he was sitting behind guys that weren't really coming off the field. Phillip Rivers wasn't coming off the field. Russell Wilson in Seattle wasn't coming off the field until they moved on from him. So, he finally got an opportunity to really show what he can do in Seattle, and he did really well. So now he's going to have that opportunity with the silver and black. So thanks so much for that text. I do appreciate you. And that's going to do it for today's show. That's going to do it for day one of the legal tampering period. Who knows what day two is going to bring? You got to keep your head on a swivel. Everything keeps coming up fast and furious. Every time you start to look at one piece of news, boom, some other news pops up that's worth talking about, worth mentioning. So we'll continue to monitor everything. We'll continue to bring you everything and talk about it and talk about how moves that the Raiders make affect them, and obviously moves that are made in the AFC West affect the other teams as well. We'll get more calls and texts, and we'll have plenty of news and notes and plenty of conversation as everything rolls on, as it's full steam ahead to Wednesday, 4 p.m. Eastern time, 1 Pacific time, when the new league year opens up. So until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.